We have been studying a series on evangelism specifically to find out how Jesus witnessed and how Jesus did evangelism. Have you been following? Has it piqued your interest a little? As we've looked at the ways in which Jesus looked. Last time, anyone remember what we spoke about? Jesus witnessing to the rich and the righteous. So there's the rich and the poor, and there's the righteous, and there's the sinner or the unrighteous. And we noticed that he had these different audiences that he spoke to. And so we ask ourselves the question, what is the audience that Jesus spoke to that was most successful? And what lessons can we learn from this as we in the McMinnville Adventist Christian Church reach out and witness to those around us? How does that work? We just read, thank you, Mikey and Mommy Rose, Matthew 9, verse 13b, which says, "For I have come to call not those who think they are righteous," or as their version said, who think that they are good, "but those who know that they are sinners." Not those who think they are righteous, but those that know I'm a sinner. There's a big difference, isn't there? When Jesus did evangelism, who did he reach out to? Who did he speak to, and who did his message touch? We have noticed that he had encounters with the rich and the poor, yes, with the righteous and the sinners. Where and with whom did he have his greatest success? We're going to look at 3 chapters, some of the stories in Luke 13, 14, and 15. So turn in your Bibles there if you wish. Luke 13, 14, and 15. And we're first starting at Luke 13 and there verse 10. Luke chapter 13 and from verse 10. And that's where Jesus starts to tell a story in Luke chapter 13 and there from verse 10. One Sabbath day, as Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, Jesus preached. He was a preacher, and he was teaching in church. He saw a woman with a crippled, who had been crippled by an evil spirit. She had been bent double for 18 years and was unable to stand up straight. I remember we had a lady here in our church some years ago. You'll remember her. She was bent over like this. And I remember when I would greet at the door, I would see her head, but then she would look up at me like this, and I would bend down to greet her. And I'd get a big smile. Just a saintly woman of God. Being bent over like that, I can't even walk like that for a little bit, and my back starts to say, you know, because of all the weight that creates. And so this woman was bent over and had never, as it were, in years probably, maybe ever had this opportunity to stand up straight. Do you appreciate that? That you can actually stand up straight is a blessing. It's a blessing. When Jesus saw her, what do you think he thought? Oh, it's just one of those again in church, man. You know, Jesus had something that we all need a big abundance of, and that is compassion. And he reaches out. Thank you, yes. He reaches out. He says he calls her over. He called her over and said, "Dear woman, I have a message for you. You are healed of your illness." Then he touched her, and instantly she could stand up straight. Can you hear those bones? Hey, wow, what's happened to us? And she bends them straight, and she stands up straight. Can you imagine that smile? $1 million smile. Wow. What has just happened? Her reaction was what? She stood up straight. My Bible says, how she praised God! Exclamation mark. How she prayed. Would you do that? I bet you would. I mean, just response, praising God. Is that the correct response to Jesus giving me the gift of healing? Absolutely. Wouldn't some of us here today, and some of those who we prayed for on the list on our bulletins, wish that that could happen to you just today? What happened in church today would become quite a story that would be talked over the next weeks and weeks and weeks. What happened here was nothing but an absolute miracle of God. Did the whole church rejoice? It says the leader of the synagogue, let's call him the pastor of the church, has a response. It says, in my version, it says he was indignant. What does indignant mean? What on earth is happening here in my church? Indignant that Jesus had healed her on the Sabbath day. There are 6 days of the week for working, he said to the crowd. Come on those days to be healed, not on the Sabbath. Put a sign on the door. Healings take place here, Tuesdays at 9:00 a.m. Stop working on Sabbath and doing this stuff. Good gracious me. Aren't there better days to do that than to come mess up my church service? The religious leader's response was probably something like, why disrupt the holy Sabbath atmosphere and the service with the spectacle of healing? Why desecrate the Sabbath with this forbidden act of working on the holy Sabbath day? Jesus doesn't leave it there, does he? How does he defend this? It says he responds, he shows up the hypocrisy in the next few verses of the religious priorities of the day by saying in verse 15, each of you works on the Sabbath day. Now, can you imagine that? Looking out in that congregation, Jesus looks at them and says, each of you Jews works on the Sabbath day. Oh, no, not me. How many of you work on the Sabbath day? Can I see your hands, please? Can you imagine him asking that question to the synagogue? These are Jews. They are protecting, they've got 613 or whatever it is, rules to keep the Sabbath holy, to guard that it may not be broken. And he asks a question, who of you work on the Sabbath? My hand is tight to my side. No ways. I'm not going to put my hand up. There's no one in the synagogue that's going to confess as a Jew, a faithful, righteous Jew, that he works on the Sabbath day. He'll be thrown out of the synagogue, out of church, excommunicated. No, he's not going to do that. And so Jesus points out and says, to people who live in an agrarian society, we have cars, they have donkeys. He says, who of you don't take your donkey on Sabbath morning out, give it water and food, and let it out in the pasture? Who of you doesn't do that? You are all working for the benefit of that dumb animal. How much more does this lady, as a daughter of God in Israel, who's been hunched over like this, caught in this trap, this burden of suffering for so many years, deserve to be set free? Just like that animal. It was interesting. It was interesting to see how that they responded. How they responded. It says there in that verse 17, this shamed his enemies, but all the people rejoiced at the wonderful things he did. One group was shamed, the other group were rejoicing with her as she praised God. You know, when I was a kid, I remember having to do chores, right? Kids still do chores, right? But I remember there were certain chores that I didn't have to do on the Sabbath. I didn't have to necessarily clean my room or vacuum the floor or do stuff like that on Sabbath. We were in church anyway. I wasn't playing in my room. But there were certain chores that I had to do on the Sabbath. I had to get up. My dad always had cows. He loved to have his own fresh milk. He always had chickens, had his own eggs. You know, he didn't like buying stuff that were chemicals and stuff added in. He always had his own fruit trees, and he always had his own veggies that he planted. And guess who had to help do those as chores? My brother and I had to milk these cows. And so Sabbath morning, bright and early, first job was go and grab that pail, march out in the cold of winter or summer, whatever time it may be, down to the barn and get the cows out and ready and fed, strap them up and start milking. It's the old style. You work hard. Is this working on Sabbath? You bet it's working on Sabbath. I would come back with that pail filled with milk. My hands smell like I would never get this stuff off me. And what will the girls say when I go to Sabbath school and I stink like a barn? But that was all part of Sabbath chores. The chickens too had to be let out, given food and water. When we were down in Grants Pass just a while ago, and I was staying at relatives of Keith and Muriel down there in their home, they had chickens, and every morning Bev or I would have to go and open the chicken. Just to, it took me back to those memories way back. And the rooster comes running out, struts around there, and the chickens are so happy to be opened up in the morning because they want to get out. Feed them, give their food, and they come running like they're like little children. It's a fun thing to do if you've never done it. But Sabbath, did we say, okay, we're not going to feed the chickens on Sabbath? Oh, we're not going to feed the cows and not going to milk the cows? My dad looked at me sternly one day when I forgot. Or when I didn't want to go home because I was enjoying being at church with my friends so much in that afternoon. And he's saying, the sun is about to set, but you need to be there before the sun sets to start milking those cows. On the Sabbath, you need to go milk those cows. He looked at me sternly and he said, would you like to walk with an over-bloated bladder? And he said, those cows need to be milked. They need to be released from that pressure. They need to be milked. That's what they need. I never forgot that. Thank you, Ronsley. And after that, I was a little more conscientious. Those poor things are standing there, big udders, they need to be milked. Jesus comes out here. Wasn't he just an amazingly practical person? Wasn't he just an amazing Christian that had his head screwed on straight? Sometimes we get so warped in our holiness, and we're so holy that it's hard to be saved. Is that possible? Is that possible? Jesus is saying, you make the Sabbath so holy, you Jews, I can't heal or save people. But that is what the day was meant for. Is there an application for us today? Is it possible that one can protect the holiness of the Sabbath, which is good, but by so focusing on the rules, for example, the upholding of, and I'm just using an example, of upholding reverence and silence to the point that you cannot experience or express joy in being saved? I've been in churches like that. Some of you may have also. It's more important to police the church. And if you don't say a word. I believe in reverence. There's a time and a place for it. You know that. But does it become more important than my rejoicing in the salvation of God? The Jewish religious system indicated that the rule was more important than people. And Jesus was teaching that the rule was there for people, not the other way around, as he said in Mark chapter 2:27, when he said the Sabbath was made for man, to help him. Not man made for the Sabbath, as if the Sabbath was more important than man. And then he goes and he tells another story in Luke 14. Let's go to the next chapter. Luke chapter 14, a very similar story there in the first few verses. Luke chapter 14 says, one Sabbath day. Now he's not in the synagogue. He's actually invited to Sabbath lunch. I think you can relate to that, right? One Sabbath day, Jesus went to eat dinner in the home of a leader of the Pharisees. Now remember, the Pharisees were known as the holy ones. And the people were watching him closely. There was a man there whose arms and legs were swollen. I don't know, that must have been terribly uncomfortable. You've probably known people with that, and the doctors can tell us the diseases and the nurses what that would be called, but I don't know. I know in Africa, edema, I hear in Africa we have a disease called elephantitis. It's just this swelling. I mean, the legs are just swollen, and a person can hardly walk because of all this edema or whatever it was for this man. This time not a woman, a man, arms and legs swollen. So his arms were swollen too. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in religious law. He preempts this. He starts first off and he says, is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath day or not? Hey guys, I want to ask you, is this permitted to heal somebody? He's not asking for permission. He's saying, is this permitted? When they refuse to answer, better shut up, don't say anything. He's too smart. You know, you're going to put your foot into it. No, don't say anything. Shh. When they refused to answer, Jesus touched the man, the sick man, and healed him and sent him away. Then he turned to them, those Pharisees and the others, and said, which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or your cow falls into a pit, don't you rush to get him out? And again, they could not answer. So once again we find Jesus does something now, after this, that I have never done. Keep reading. He says, while he's still at the table, he says, when Jesus, verse 7, noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seats of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. I have never been so brazen. If I were invited by Terry for lunch, to go to his lunch, and if there were other guests too, and I noticed they were all standing for the front of the line and grabbing to get the best food that we set out there, to hush them all and say, no, I need to give you guys all some advice. Jesus just nailed it right there. I'm a little bashful, I must say. I'm learning something here about Jesus' method of evangelism. Wow. When you are invited, he says, to a wedding feast, don't sit in the seat of honor. What if someone who is more distinguished than you has also been invited? The host will come and say, give this person your seat. Then you'll be embarrassed and you will have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. He says instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Then when your host sees you, and he will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you, and he'll move you up. You know, you'll move up to business class, or you'll be flying much better. Okay. Then when your host sees you, he'll say, friend, come up. Then you will be honored in front of all your guests. Verse 11, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then he turned to his hosts. When you put on a luncheon, he teaches a second lesson, as if that first one isn't enough. Goodness me, wow. The importance of humility, not fame or recognition. Very important lesson. Then in the next verses 12 and on, He teaches the second lesson. When you put on a luncheon, now he's talking to the guy who's in charge, who invited him. He says, don't invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your rich neighbors, for they will invite you back. And that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Then, at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. Wow. What a lesson. Invite the ones that you seldom associate with at church. No, but Pastor, no, now you're meddling. No. My wife doesn't like that. She's not comfortable with those people. She invites only the friends that she's comfortable with. Jesus is saying, sometimes reach out of your comfort zone, and there's some people in the church that you see there, but you don't know because you don't speak to them. They're not in your Sabbath school class. And Lord, why are you pushing me out of my comfort zone to invite those people to lunch? Don't just invite those to Sabbath lunch you feel comfortable with, is what I hear Jesus saying. Then in verse 15, to break the atmosphere, one of the guests pipes up. And he makes an exclamation and he says, wow, what a wonderful thing to be able to attend the banquet in the kingdom of God. And Jesus, what does he do? This guest pipes up about how great it will be to attend the banquet of God in heaven. And Jesus brings the focus back from reward to mission. Because the statement of the guest was, how wonderful it won't be to be in heaven at that long silver table, and you've said that, I've said that. And Jesus says, you're focusing on the reward, what you're going to get in heaven. And he says, change the focus from reward and put it on mission. What does that mean? What does mission, the realities of the mission invitation involve? He says, very few come, very few accept the invitation to God's banquet in heaven because they have more important things to do. And Jesus then comes to the reality and he says, it's okay to focus on the reward, but how do you get the reward? Because many have been invited and you may be one of them that won't be there at that table. And then he illustrates this and he says, one person says, I've just bought a new farm. I need to go and check it out, test the soil, see if there's enough water for the crops. I need to first go do that. I can't come to your banquet. Jesus says, not everyone is wishing and hoping for that reward. Some have other priorities that are more important than even that. Another person says, I just bought a fleet of 5 new semis. They're beautifully red and they're painted. Oh man, my name is on them for my business. And I need to go and put them through the test. I need to try them out. Another person says, I just got married. And I have plans for a dream honeymoon in Hawaii. It's booked. I'm flying there Monday morning. I can't be at your banquet. Then it says the master's reaction was not happy, to say the least. It actually says he was mad. He was upset. He ordered that his servants go downtown with his bus, and load up all the homeless and the destitute and bring them to the banquet, the friendship hall in the Adventist church, so that we can have a big banquet and there will be people to enjoy the food. Do you see Jesus' point? Jesus goes and accepts a lunch invitation, and it turns into, it sounds like to me like a great sermon, a great teaching lesson. The way Jesus did evangelism was to look at the practical life of people, and every occurrence. Keith over here wanted to give me, a stranger, a pamphlet. And the one me didn't see any need for that. and tossed it aside because of my prejudices. The other me was depressed and shocked and surprised that someone even spoke to me, and I accepted it gladly, and I benefited from it. As I read it, I formed a new relationship with Jesus, and I learned to know him better as I made a new decision to surrender to him and allow him to be Lord of my life. Look at verse 25 to 27 of that chapter 14. It says that as soon as he kind of leaves, I can imagine leaving this Sabbath invitation, so he's leaving. A whole large crowd follows him. Now, you must remember, in those days, if there's a teacher and a crowd follow you, that makes you a what? That makes you a teacher. That makes you like a prophet. Yeah, that makes you a person that is revered, who has wisdom. And they want to gain that. They want to be, and if you keep following that person, they call you a disciple. So there were teachers in those days, and those leaders or teachers had disciples, a group of disciples. Jesus had 12 of them. Here he's walking, and there's a whole crowd of people who are wanting to sign up to be a disciple. Do they just want the mission, the reward, or do you think they focused on the mission? I don't know. It doesn't say yet. But he turns around and he says, hey, wow. Now, if I turned around, you know what I would think? Hey, whoa, look at this crowd that's following me. If I spoke such wisdom here today and I left church over here and you all arrived for lunch at my home, no, I'm just kidding. You all followed me out here and you just wanted to keep talking to me, I would feel, wow, I must have said something right, something good. There's a need. Jesus turns around to this big crowd, and instead of saying, hey, guys, you following the right leader, come on, you'll hear some more. What does he tell them? He tells them the most horrible, horrible stuff ever that would diminish any crowd, guaranteed. Wow. So he says, if you want to follow me here are the requirements, here are the rules. You want to follow me? Sure, come. But I've got some requirements if you want to follow me. Number one, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else. Your father, your mother, your wife, your children, your brothers, your sisters, yes, even your own life. You must just love me. Is that arrogant or what? It sounds like it. He's laying down a very clear rule, and he's saying, if you want to truly follow me, this is not just about rewards. It's not just about food, physical food. This is deeper than that. And he continues, he says, otherwise you cannot be my disciple, because a follower is a disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Then he adds in verse 33, so you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. Same thing he said to the rich young ruler. Everything you own, go and sell. If you can do that, come follow me, you'll be my disciple. I can just see that crowd immediately from 200 people behind him diminish to 2, if that. Next time he looks around, phew, where have all the people gone? They're gone. They're no longer there. How did Jesus do evangelism? Is evangelism always about 10,000 people are going to attend our evangelistic campaign? Do you wish there were more people? Yes, I always wish there were more people. But I've also seen crowds diminish the moment you start to speak about the requirements of the cross that it has upon my heart and your heart. Wow. So what have we learned from Luke 13 and 14? What I've learned is who Jesus recommends as the most successful target audience for evangelism. The suffering, the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, verse 13. And those who are willing to give up everything, verse 33. What was the religious teaching and belief of the time? That if you were holy and you live a righteous life, then you were blessed with health and riches, right? That was the belief. It was mentioned back by Moses in Deuteronomy 28, 29, somewhere around there. He was talking about the blessings and the curses. If you follow me, you obey me, you'll be blessed. The Jews implicitly believed that in a mechanical way. You just go through these right actions, do the right behaviors, do the right stuff, and you'll end up blessed with material goods as well. So Jesus comes along and he takes that belief, that Jewish belief that if you're rich, you know that you are righteous. If you're righteous, you will be rich because you will be blessed. And he turns it upside down. He turns the tables upside down. And what does he do? He says it's the poor and the sick who are the best prospects for evangelism, not the rich and the healthy. They are the ones who have very little to give up, and they have a real sense of need for forgiveness, for a relationship with the one who can heal and restore their miserable lives and make them whole again. And so we come to the next chapter, chapter 15. And Jesus talks about, right there in the beginning, the very few verses of chapter 15, the first few verses of chapter 15, he says what? Tax collectors, other notorious sinners, often came to listen to Jesus. This made the Pharisees and teachers of the law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. How could he do that? And Jesus is saying, these are the best prospects for the kingdom of heaven. And the holy ones, the Pharisees and the others, were saying, no, 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 no. They're not blessed, they're sinners. If they were not sinners, they would be rich and blessed. That's what they believed. Wow. And then Jesus tells three stories. The first story he tells is that of a lost sheep, a person who realizes he is helpless to save himself. Second story he tells is that of a lost coin. It doesn't know it's lost, but when it's found, there is rejoicing over its being found. The third story, lastly, that of a son who willfully becomes lost by leaving home, and then he loses. He is lost, he becomes lost by leaving home, but then he becomes really lost when he loses his riches and holiness. He comes back with no riches or holiness to offer his father. He casts himself on the mercy of his father and gives him grace, forgives him, and welcomes him back. In contrast, there is the older brother who is too holy to save, because he has followed all the religious ceremonies, the rituals perfectly, but he did not have a relationship with his father based on mercy and grace and forgiveness. And that is why Jesus said to the rich young ruler, go sell everything, then come and follow me. He says, your riches and keeping of the rules and rituals are making you too holy to save. That is why Jesus made that very difficult statement to understand in Matthew 5, verse 20, where he says, I tell you that unless your righteousness, your holiness, your goodness is better, exceeds, surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. How can I ever be more righteous than that Pharisee that does everything right? And Jesus says, your righteousness must surpass that. The religious leaders of Jesus' day were too holy to be saved. The challenge that I find in these passages is a challenge that I think you've picked up so far. What does this mean for McMinnville Adventist Christian Church? What does this mean for you and for me? What is the lesson? What's the take home? message that we take home from this. Are you and I too holy to be saved? Are you and I the right target audience for evangelism? And if we become the agents of Jesus to reach out in evangelism to others out there, if we do not fit the criteria that Jesus set by being willing to give up, to take our cross and follow Him, yes, then am I going to be a successful witness, a tool in the hands of the Holy Spirit to touch the lives of others in evangelism. Jesus said that the last church living at the time of the end of this world's history would have this problem. Revelation 3 verse 17, you say I am rich, I have everything I want, I don't need a thing, but you don't realize that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. Jesus says, you need to realize that you are poor and blind and naked, that you are that. If you are that, then you can be saved. If you don't realize that, you're too holy to be saved. I can't reach you. So the question comes to me, am I a good target for evangelism? Or is that only for the others out there? They are the targets of evangelism. Those who don't know and follow the truth as I know it in my faith tradition. Meaning, do I perceive myself as such a good person, knowing and following all the rules of the church I belong to, that I may be too good or too holy to be saved or to help save others? The words of the following hymn expresses what I feel. I am coming to the cross. I'm poor and weak and blind. I'm counting all but dross. I shall full salvation find. Ever thought of the words of that hymn? I am coming to the cross. I am poor and weak and blind. I am counting all but dross. I shall full salvation find. Turn with me to 307 in your hymnal right there. Hymn number 307, 307. Grab the hymnal in front of you there. 307. And see if you can identify with those words. And if you can identify with those words, why don't you stand with me as we sing the first and the third, just those two, the first and the third, and look at those words, number 1 and number 3. Stand with me, please. I am coming to the cross. I am poor and weak and blind. I am counting all but dross. I shall full salvation find. I am trusting, Lord, in Thee, O the Lamb of Calvary. Humbly at I bow. Save me, Jesus, save me now. Here I give my all to Thee, friends and time and earthly store, soul and body Thine to be, wholly Thine forevermore. I am trusting, Lord, in Thee, O the Lamb of Calvary. Humbly at Thy cross I bow. Save me, Jesus. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for the cross of Calvary. Thank you, Lord, that your Holy Spirit burns down deep into our hearts, convicting us that we are poor, miserable, blind, and naked, and that we need your eye salve, we need your righteous robe, we need to be clothed by you. And only then can we truly, with a cross on our shoulders, reach out and be effective witnesses to those around us. Witnesses to the humble, lowly Jesus, not the arrogant, proud, rich Jesus. Lord, help us in our witness that we will truly love people because we love Jesus. Lead us as we go from this place, and may this congregation, this group of followers of the lovely, lonely, humble Jesus, may we become more like Jesus so that our witness may be effective this year and this week and this day, in Jesus' name.